Welcome to Misunderstood, where we talk about identity, the meaning of the word race, and explore the multicultural and multiracial experience through personal stories, candid conversations, and expert insights. I'm your host, Hannah Lee. Thank you for being here. If you tuned in to our last episode, then you heard the wonderful conversation I had with Rahul about his teen years and the journey of navigating his mixed race identity. Well, today we have the pleasure of speaking with someone you might remember from our Free to Be Festival episode, Rahul's mother, Punita Khanna. Punita, who was born in India, raised in Chicago, and now is based in LA, has navigated the intersections of various cultures throughout her life. Her husband, John, is white with English ancestry, and together they've raised their son, Rahul, in a rich blend of Indian and American cultures. Punita's journey began over 2 decades ago when she sought a community that would resonate with her multicultural family. This quest led her to meet with numerous multicultural families and individuals, seeking to understand the unique challenges and triumphs they face. However, she noticed a significant gap, a lack of community specifically for multiracial and multicultural South Asians. This realization sparked a mission to create a space where stories like hers could be shared and celebrated. Her experiences and insights culminated in the publication of her book, Mixed Daisies, Stories of Multiracial South Asians, co-authored with her son Rahul. This book captures the diverse narratives of South Asians navigating intercultural marriages and raising multiracial children, offering a much-needed voice to this underrepresented group. Today, we are excited to get Punita's perspective on her interracial marriage as well as her perspective as a mother raising a mixed-race child.
Mostly you would just say, I'm Indian. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not, because when I go to India, I'm not accepted there either as being Indian. Don't feel right to me, and I bolt. And that was this getting married. It wasn't that they were not wanting me to get married, my parents. There were opportunities. I could have married the person they brought in front of me. That's what a lot of my friends did. They all did that. This is the person you're going to marry. Like, okay, well, that was our community. That's how we were raised. Something in me just bolted. But I remember at one point Rahul just laughing at somewhere, and he said, Dad, if you were darker, you'd be in jail. And it was his way. It was a laughing situation, but it was also a way of us recognizing there's a privilege that John doesn't even see he has.
Before we begin the episode, it's important to say that Misunderstood is a space where stories, ideas, and research are shared for your consideration, and I encourage you to form your own opinions in light of your own knowledge and experience. My hope is to explore, learn, and grow together with you. I don't claim to have any of the answers. My aim is just to start conversations around these topics. Welcome, Punita.
Hi there, Hannah Lee. It's so great to be here today and to see you again.
Yes, Punita's in my living room. It's so rare because I often have so many guests that are from around the world and we're talking over Zoom. So it's actually unusual for me to have a guest in person.
Oh, well, this is really nice. I'm so glad to be here.
We had Rahul here last week. And what did you think?
You know, I'm proud of anything Rahul does. And so, of course, I knew that I would be proud of whatever he said on that. But then it was so interesting to listen to it because in this last year, he went away to college. So we have not had much interaction. And it was the first, he was away from home and he's still away from home. So over 10 months. And so I'm listening to a young adult and I'm listening to a formed individual and not the high schooler who left home. So I could see him being reflective as he was recounting his experiences to you. I heard that. I heard the thoughtfulness. And then I always did a little yay every now and then because it was, oh, good, he remembered that. Okay, now he knows why we did X, Y, Z. And so that was refreshing to hear. And I think the overall episode was positive. And I did hear he did give me some compliments from time to time. So that's always good to hear, especially when they go away to college and have time to think about growing up in your household. So I liked it. Thank you.
Oh, well, Rahul, if you're listening to this episode, get ready. So we like to start with a few fun facts or facts. They don't have to be fun. Do you have anything to share with us today?
Sure. I have one that I'm very proud of. I love to travel. And for a great period of my life, I was always traveling abroad. And after we got married, and this is something Americans do, their rite of passage is driving cross country. And so John had already done that and he wasn't very interested. And then I realized, I said, you know what? I want to finish all 50 states. So I put that on my bucket list. And I'm proud to say that I have visited all 50 states, but John has only visited 48. So I beat him on that one. And we took about 10 years to do that as a family. And then it worked for our little guy because I always thought Europe was wasted on babies. And so I said, we don't need to do that. But, and again, John being American, they have relatives all over the country. So it was great because I'd say, oh, you have somebody in North Carolina? I think we need to visit Cousin Nancy. He hadn't seen Cousin Nancy in decades, but we visited his relatives. I started with that. So he visited extended family. And then he's really good at planning trips. So we would pick a region of the country to go to. We'd fly there, rent a car, and visit like 4 or 5 states. And he would pick out unusual things to see. So it wasn't always the larger cities. It was what they call the second cities, the smaller towns. And you really come away with a deep appreciation of this country, the beauty of it all, the vastness of it all. And then, as you can see in politics, the highly divisiveness of it all, because people in different parts of the country think differently. They're exposed to different things. You see a lot of history back east, and you see a different type of history on the West Coast. And I grew up with a different type of history, being from Chicago and learning about that in the Midwest. And then we were all introduced to the South. So it was fantastic. So I'm very proud to say that.
Wow, that's incredible. One of the things that I really love about travel is that it really does open up your perspective, and it asks you to reconsider, why do you do things a certain way? And is it necessary to do it in that specific way? And then you come home and you have all these other options of how you could do something, how you could potentially make a cup of coffee or, go about your routine. That's amazing that you've been able to do all that traveling and to take Rahul along with you and do that as a family. So just reading up about you, I also read that you are a breast cancer survivor and you have over 25 years of experience in healthcare management. And then you also started advocating for breast cancer patients.
Yes, I did get breast cancer, and that was a shock because it was not something that was known in my family history. There was no family history of it. There was no absolute reason for me to think I was healthy, that I would even have any type of a disease. And so it was a routine mammogram, and I had had about 10 of them clear by then. And so I went in, you go in for your annual checkup, and they detected something. And I tell you, I just keep thankful for, again, the technologies we have in this country and the people that are reading them. It was a little speck. And if somebody had discounted that or not looked closely and waited another year, I would have a more different type of experience. And then any time that you have any kind of treatments and you're taking drugs, you do have side effects. And I always like to say, well, I'm special because anything I do, I experience side effects that nobody else experienced, that they knew about, And so I would tell them I had this, and they were like, well, we've been doing this for decades and nobody's had this. So I was like, okay, well, it's just me. So I did have some suffering along the way from some of the treatments that I had, and you just learn to manage it. But again, I'm grateful it was caught early. I'm grateful I had access to a wonderful healthcare system, and grateful to be here.
So after you were in remission, you decided that you wanted to help advocate for other cancer patients and help them navigate the system and make sure that they're able to take ownership of their decisions along the way?
Yes. So when I was going through my journey, and I had worked in healthcare management, and you never think, and I'd always been on the business side, worked very closely with physicians and the whole allied health professionals, but I never thought about representation. And I never thought about actually being a patient, a long-term patient. And as I was going through my own journey, and I'm reading brochures, and I'm looking at on websites, and I'm just looking at what's out there, and they're talking about patient stories. And I did not see a South Asian patient. We tend to think minorities as African American or Latino prevalently. And so you have pictures and photos of them. And if you get an Asian, most probably it's an East Asian. But I didn't see anybody that looked like me. And for a long time, I was not able to speak about it because I was going through so much myself. And so towards the end, is opportunities just come to you, and it's your decision to take them or not. And I had an opportunity to talk about it, the first one, and I really had to think about it because it's not like me to share anything publicly. I'm very private. And so I jumped on that. And I think it wasn't a cognizant, I've got to go out and do this. Again, everything happens organically. And if I look back, I think that because I had been seeing for a number of years the lack of representation, that probably prompted something in me to say, well, I should speak out. And I didn't even know I knew some South Asian women that had breast cancer, but the great majority of our friends don't know. I did not tell all of my friends. I was very private about it. And so I started speaking out, and that engagement led from one to another. And I speak about it in different terms. One is a South Asian woman. I've put together some events for South Asians and actually enlisted several other women with breast cancer. We spoke about our experiences to put our stories out there. And then also in the mainstream media, I've been on various other types of media talking about my decision-making process and some of the treatments and therapies that I elected to undergo. And that's important because as a patient, you are thrown with so much information all at one time, and most people don't have a medical background. Again, I was fortunate that I come from a community. There are a lot of physicians and allied health professionals. So I did reach out to some of them and say, well, this is being suggested, or should I go this route or that route? So I had some input from people. And I wanted to put that out there that having cancer, or I think any illness, there's not one treatment protocol. There are so many variables because you could go one way, but then you might have side effects. Then you have to go another way, which is what happened to me. And then you might have to go another way. So you can't look at another person's journey and say, oop, boom, clean cut. I had surgery. I'm going to take a couple of drugs. I'm going to be okay. That's not everyone's story. And so that's why I wanted to share my story. So there's a couple of different realms in which I speak.
How did it feel as a private person to stand there and share your story?
So initially, it was difficult for me, and I had to really think about what I was saying. And then, the other part of my story is that, and this is, I think, the South Asian part combined with being private, we did not tell our son. When I said we kept it very private, Rahul was 11, I believe. And so he was going to middle school, and somebody a few years earlier, and you know how people say stuff and it might not resonate with you back at that time, you're having a conversation, but it came to my forefront right when I got diagnosed. A couple of things. That person had said, and it was a husband whose wife had been detected with breast cancer, and they elected not to tell their children. And in conversation, again, this was several years earlier, and I said, well, why not? Because Americans here talk about everything, and they were not American. They were also South Asian. And the man explained that, he had grown up. He was young. His mom had a terminal illness, and I'm not sure if she passed away. And he just remembered that his young life became all about his mother. Going to hospitals, and that was the whole household. And he said, we don't know what's going to happen with his wife now, who had an illness. And so we just are going to wait and see. Why disrupt the kids' lives if you don't have answers for them? And so I don't know now when they eventually told their kids, but that popped in my head. And we were going through so much with Rahul, who was having a nice life and all of that. That was one. The second factor was my husband is a cancer survivor, and not many people knew that. He got it soon after we got married. But a few years before I was diagnosed, my husband's brother was diagnosed with cancer and passed away within 4 months. It was very aggressive. He had just retired, ready to embrace different stage of life, and he got it, and that was a shock for the family. My husband, his siblings, they went into depression because this was their oldest brother, and he was a physician, and he was gone just like that. And my son knew about that, and he knew how Daddy felt. and he knew that Dad has cancer. So we had a lot of things. I mean, I took a whole weekend before I told John because I didn't even know how to tell John, because you don't know the outcome. A little speck doesn't mean anything. Invested, that's all I knew, was it was a speck and I needed to go in for more testing. You don't know. You know, you can be as healthy, and we all have no stories about that. And then I very quickly told John, we're not going to tell Rahul until we figured this out. I don't have any answers. And why disrupt him? So again, that was another reason for remaining quiet during the first 5-6 years of going through treatment. I mean, Rahul was in school. I could see doctors during the day. So that was another thing, was that I didn't make our lives about me. And that was important to me. But when you go to therapy in Americans, and I did cancer support therapy and stuff, they really promote the whole family and the whole family coming in and the husband separately. And the kid was like, no, we don't have time for that. I want to give my child a childhood. I wanted him to have fun, to be young, and not have to deal with what I was going through. What I was going through was during the day, and he went to sleep, I went to sleep. It was fine. And look, the outcome, I'm fine. If we had had another turn, we would have discussed it with him. If my health was not improving, we would have opened up that dialogue.
So at what point did you tell Rahul?
So, I never told him openly. What happened was I was working and talking, and this is the COVID now pandemic. He's, a teenager up in his room. I'm downstairs, the living room on the table, working and telling my stories to people. He found out that way. I don't even know the exact date. He's never said anything, but I think that's a question for him, if he even remembers how he realized that Mom has breast cancer.
Wow.
Because now I talk about it openly. I think because I was working so much at home and talking about it, I was working in this space. At some point I realized, oh, he must have heard. But he never came down teary-eyed and said, what? Because we did talk about cancer. We have had other family members diagnosed with cancer since then, and other friends diagnosed. And I think we were just home so much, it just became a part of the conversation.
Ooh, you talking about all of this is making me very emotional, obviously because it's an emotional story you're sharing, but also personally for me, my father passed away from cancer, and he never told us that he had cancer. And we only found out when we got the news of his passing, and it was extremely, extremely difficult for me to accept that. And I was banging my head on the wall for months and months and months, trying to understand why didn't he tell us why? And I have more peace and acceptance around it now. And it's actually helpful for me to speak with you today, even though we have a whole other episode to do, but it is helpful for me to hear a parent, and because my father was in Japan when he had the illness, so we were very far away from each other, but you were in the same household and still made that decision. I'm deciding not to share this with my kid for however many reasons you had. And it's nice to hear your side of things. And I kind of do feel this, I'll never know why my father didn't share that with us, but I'd like to think there was maybe that parent wanting to protect their child and, not wanting them to take that on. So anyway. Whew.
But Hannah Lee, this is not uncommon, because I worked in the space for a number of years. I was floored how many women told me their daughter doesn't know. They don't know. It's only the husband, not the family. I just thought it was me, and because I had this friend, or being South Asian, we don't talk about it. American women do. And it was that was a revelation. And, there's some people have shame, some people have guilt, some people have, how could this happen to me? I did everything right in life. Why? I don't know if you remember Jackie Kennedy Onassis. She passed away 5 months after she was diagnosed with brain cancer, I believe. And I think it was February. She passed away by May. And what I have read now, that she also said, why did this happen to me? Because she said, she took care of herself. She had access to the best physicians. And I remember one thing reading, she was like, I did yoga every day. People, you're struggling with it yourself. And there is an element about, for my sake, it sounds like maybe your dad's sake or something, you're protecting your child. Because the burden that you're carrying, I didn't have any answers for Rahul, and we would spend middle school going to therapy together. And I thought, what's the point of that? Let him have fun. We've got piano to do. We've got, school. We've got activities. We've got his dance. We've got debate. We have other things to focus on. Let him be him. I mean, that was my decision. But what I'm trying to say, it's not uncommon. It's less common than you expect, but it's not uncommon.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And we just lost another dear friend to cancer, and we have friends that are dealing with cancer right now. And so if anybody listening to this, we're rooting for you. So this kind of gives a whole other layer to those teenage years when Rahul was struggling to navigate his identity as a mixed teen, and you were going through your own thing. The whole cancer thing was happening. You were trying to find community. So I wanted to speak with you today. Initially, we were going to have both of you in the same room, but just for logistical reasons, I decided to split you up. But I think it actually worked for the better because we get to hear your perspective and what it's like for a parent who is trying to be there for their kid. And there's only so much you can do to be there for them, to support them. What was it like for you during those years when Rahul was struggling to kind of figure out who he was?
We had always talked about being both, or at the most language, or we would say half and half, but I know now getting more educated, being both is appropriate. And so there was never John and I talked about that, just how we were going to name our child. We didn't know what gender it was going to be. We had names selected both. It was always the child is both cultures. And, I was born in India, but I grew up in Chicago. There was no community. We immigrated in the mid-'60s and early 70s. So before the whole wave which started in the mid-'60s, but the real wave of South Asians was 1980s on. So I was a teenager before there was a whole community. There were no temples. There were no community gatherings, none of these celebrations, no dance school, nothing like that. So I didn't have that, but I had a rich culture and we did a few things. But I became aware of the culture as an adult because the community growing was all around you, and I don't speak the language, Do
you understand it though?
I understand, yes. Hindi, not the songs, they go kind of fast. But conversationally, Hindi and Punjabi. And with Punjabi, you can understand Urdu, or with Hindi, you can understand Urdu. So I can stretch a little bit and kind of make that out, but the northern languages. So Rahul, might have described, in the house there was Indian music playing. Saturday mornings there was a show. Everybody likes Bollywood songs. So I would have the show on and I'd wear outfits. And we like Indian food, and we eat that half the time at home. And so
you're also 50-50 with
everything is 50-50.
So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we got Indian food.
Something like that, because Indian food, to our stomachs, and we did not grow up with it every day at home either. My mom, you're living in the U.S. There's hot dogs, there's pizza. Mom and dad were professionals, who wants to, in India, in a different life, and even now middle class on up, households have cooks. Yeah. The wives, it's different. You're not slaving over the kitchen after you've worked. You're not washing dishes. So that's why we did it at home. Friday night, Chicago, Friday night was Chinese or pizza, or something like that. And so, we kept that in our house also. So I know when Rahul was younger, he would say he's Indian. And I think he explains it now. I'm not sure as a child how much of that is cognizant in his head, that I'm Indian because I see white all around me, as he explains it now. But teenagers, go through their own identity without layering mixed race.
Yeah.
Teenagers today have identity challenges, or they have identity opportunities. And so they can be whoever they want to be. And so, and I heard this in Rahul's taping with you, that it was really ninth grade. And that's why I thought, oh, he's saying the same thing that I saw, that it was ninth grade, that in ninth grade, you're 13, 14 years old. He would always say he was Indian. But then at school, there was a mixed race club. I mean, how cool was that? Probably, I think 3 years earlier, there wouldn't have been. And he was always, he formed a South Asian club. There was like 4 students in there. And when he entered ninth grade and saw there was a mixed race club, he came home that day and said, Mom, I went to their meeting. I have more in common with the mixed race people than I do with the South Asian people. And that mixed race club was Persian white, Black, Latino, Korean white. It wasn't Indian, there was no other Indian. And I think that all these experiences helped him, again, organically, to look at the information that was out there, for him to figure out, maybe sometimes he was cognizant about it, maybe sometimes he wasn't. So again, helping Rahul navigate his identity was just a natural extension of what I had been seeking, what I saw that he was becoming open to, and then as I heard in his head, what he was figuring out what he could be. I mean, it would have been fine with John or me if he said, I'm Indian. I'm only going to be Indian. I'm doing Indian things, only eating Indian food. It's like, fine, that's your choice. I'm white. A lot of kids deny one part of their culture or choose another part of themselves, and that's it. And some Indian families, South Asian families, name their kids 2 American names. That's it. So I gave those opportunities to Rahul.
I mean, in this case, he did sort of gravitate towards his Indian background, but do you really feel that if he were to just be like, I'm a white man and I don't want to have anything to do with my Indian roots, you would have been okay with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Yes. I exposed Rahul to a lot of experiences. It wasn't just like, well, here's Indian. We went to Japanese stuff. We went to Asian stuff. We went to Latino. He came home from kindergarten. I remember, Mom, I want to celebrate Kwanzaa at Christmas. I'm like, okay, we'll celebrate Kwanzaa. It didn't matter to me.
Wow.
I like life and want to experience the world. I wanted Rahul to experience it. And, and I think he mentioned this too, his Indian cousins are very Western. He's the most knowledgeable about Indian culture, heritage, speaks the language. I didn't force him. I took him to Hindi classes, and his teacher told him, well, go home and practice with your mother. And he said, well, I have a handicap. My mother doesn't speak Hindi, and we only continued that because he wanted to. If he would have said, I'm not going to, it's like, okay, I've exposed you. So, and I think, people that are 2 religions, some families say, well, we've exposed the kids to both, they'll make that choice. And I was doing that with him. We didn't give him too much religion because I didn't know too much and John doesn't care. But it was exposing him to 2 cultures.
Growing up as a first-generation immigrant, did you feel like you completely fit into your environment?
I've never fit in anywhere because I grew up in Chicago, and that 60s, 70s, it was white. We lived in white neighborhoods. Our school was white. My girlfriends from my youth are white. I mean, we have our community friends that we would see on weekends, but if you go back and think, you were just in white spaces. It's what people have said in our book. If some of the stories is, I fit in everywhere and I fit in nowhere. And that was a comment. And that has been my life, which is why I could also understand Rahul. I've always been, even working in corporate America, when I look back at my friends from the community, they were married by 21, 22. I had the ability to finish multiple degrees, get out, move to LA, get corporate jobs. They were not doing all this stuff on their own. So I have always been navigating spaces and been a pioneer in everything I've done. And when you start work, school is one thing that embraces you doing well in school and you get good grades, you get a pat on the back, teachers like you, you're compliant, all of that. Corporate world is not forgiving that way and is not welcoming. And so the time that I started, and you have to look at the history of the corporate world and women here, 10 years earlier, women that were 10 to 15 years older than me, white women, they fought a lot in corporate America, and they're still fighting today. So you didn't have Asian women, you didn't have minority women. Just look at the stories from white women. So my mentors, when I started work, and you're like, what happened? School, you're like a number one. You're coming to work, it's like, oh, 20 men, you're sitting around, 2 women, you might be the only, dark person. And there's maybe 3 women, 2 white, you. And I learned a lot from that environment also is women, you keep your head down, So I would say the discrimination there was, I always start with, well, it wasn't that I don't think they saw color first as much as I was a woman. So you had all those barriers in corporate America. So I had to navigate that space. So I've always been navigating spaces. I think what's been interesting is marrying John. And now I'm a minority woman, brown, who's raised here. I mean, I have really changed how I describe myself is I'm an American with Indian heritage. And so mostly you would just say I'm Indian. It's like, wait a minute, I'm not, because when I go to India, I'm not accepted there either as being Indian. But in marrying John, what I've gotten to see, and this has been interesting, is how somebody white navigates white spaces and the white privilege that comes with them. We all read about it. We know it's there, but you don't understand it. And it took me a while to understand it by marrying him. He sees the world differently. He operates in the world differently than I would have seen a man of color operate, which I have been used to or being around. I worked in the world and corporate, and they're all white men, but it's not as being same as being married to one. How you enter spaces, there is an acceptance of me. I see a different look that we get when I'm on John's arm versus we may be ignored if I'm with somebody Indian, or you just know they look at you differently. Even if I open my mouth and I speak without an accent, or they talk to me and they know, oh, this girl's never been to India, or she's from here. But it's very different. And sometimes John has said, oh, he'd like to retire, and he names some state. And I'm like, no, it's only white people there. He doesn't understand. I said, no, I like to live in cities, places where I've lived. I like to live in certain neighborhoods. And maybe I feel safer there. Probably that's what it is. So I've not had situations. And I think work, you could say there's racism, but I would, that's, nobody has said anything to my face, but, white women would say they experience discrimination. So I think at work it would have been a combination of both. And, these experiences I had with John talking about white privilege and what I saw was the difference. Well, I didn't have anybody in my community to talk about that with, because it was just this awareness again that I thought, am I seeing things differently because it's John and people are reacting differently, or what's going on here? And we weren't using the words white privilege, 10, 12 years ago. But what it all came together as I was interviewing one of the parents for the book. She's younger, different generation, about 15 years younger than me, I believe. And she was initially married to another Asian man, not South Asian, but East Asian. And they're separated, so their son is mixed. And now she's dating a white man. And she shared her experience. As we were talking, she said, for her, it was interesting that she had been married to another minority before. And we minorities and Asians, we navigate spaces differently. All of a sudden, and she's born here, raised here, works in corporate America. She's dating a white man. And she raised that and said, I see the world differently now, or I see how the world reacts differently to us, how he reacts and acts about his space in the world. And that jarred me because we were having a conversation and she said that. And then I realized that what I had thought and seen about John was validated because she validated it for me. And a couple of years ago, the 3 of us were traveling, John, Rahul, and myself. And now Rahul is 16-ish, let's say, and he's gone through his own identity, and he's lighter than me, darker than John. And at one point, I think we were at the airport, and there's barriers and there are lines, and you're supposed to go stand in line. John crosses the line, goes up. We were delayed, we were all annoyed. Things were just going wrong as they got to the airport. And I remember Rahul and I just shocked, looking at each other or looking at him, and it's like, John, you have to stand in line. There's like 20 other people in line. I don't think it crosses John's mind that he has to stand in line. And it partly, he's also a little eccentric. We're annoyed. It's a bad. But I remember at one point Rahul just laughing at somewhere, and he said, Dad, if you were darker, you'd be in jail. And it was his way. It was a laughing situation, but it was also a way of us recognizing there's a privilege that John doesn't even see he has. There have been other instances like that now we're attuned to, and I will, laughingly say sometimes, okay, just go and do your white thing. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of them. I don't want to deal with it. Just go. There is a privilege they have, and they don't even know they have it, because John, and this could be John, he doesn't see color. And I think Rahul mentioned that when John said to him a few years ago, well, I just thought you were a white boy. And I think if you ask John, and sometimes I'm frustrated when I talk to him, and I think he sees me as a white girl with Indian heritage. He doesn't see she's Indian. Because sometimes
that the world perceives you still as Indian.
Exactly.
Even if you don't feel that you're connected to your Indianness in the way that they see you. Yeah.
Yes. I think a lot of white people are like that. It's just the way they navigate life. And he's got dimples, and he's got blue twinkling eyes, and I've seen him do this. He'll go whatever he wants to do, which I think is wrong. He'll just twinkle his eyes. The flight attendant, and I'm like, John, you can't say that. He'll just smile, and it's like, I'm sure they think he's an eccentric white guy. It's okay, sir. You can have a second glass of this or that or whatever you're doing. The rest of us, no.
How has your parenting styles differed over the years in raising Rahul, if at all?
John and I, again, I think partly this background, white, Asian, I'm immigrant family. I was so excited when I read the book, The Tiger Mother. I was excited because she was in a multiracial relationship, and she was Chinese, and she raised 2 daughters. But it really, for moms of that 10, 12 years ago, it jarred this whole white community parent, all the experts and everything, because this Asian way about you're going to study, no sleepovers, no play dates. You've got to practice piano hours. I mean, she was extreme. And Americans are laissez-faire. John's an attorney. He's done well. His siblings are educated. The nieces and nephews are doing well. They have spaces they occupy in the world. They've never had to fight for anything. When you walk in a room, you see a white man. So what? A lot of white men, that's this world. You see me, brown woman, different thinking. And so he's laissez-faire about life. So he was laissez-faire about Rahul. So I was always the one, from the birth of a child, we've got to name them both. The heritage is both. Education, schools, what neighborhoods should we live in? Because to me, a neighborhood meant, does it have good schools? Because I was thinking about the child and how I wanted to raise the child. John wasn't thinking about any of those things. And Americans, generally speaking now, you go to good schools, okay. You want to be an attorney, fine. You want to be a hairdresser, it's fine. You don't have to be anything. You don't want to do anything, it's your life. Right? It's just like it's your life. This is fast forward now when Rahul got accepted to college, and John's like, well, he's 18, it's his life. And I was the Asian mom, like, well, no. We still have to guide him. I still have to give him my input. And, they're just like, it's hands off. He's 18, he's an adult. I was like, oh no. And so that's how I was. So my navigating was my whole way, but I made sure Indian American, we're doing this, we're doing that. And not that I liked all the Indian things, I didn't like any of all the American things, but Rahul I think he became the beneficiary of the richness of both cultures. But as one of my South Asian friends said to me recently, she said, you're so lucky. You got to do what you wanted to do with Rahul because John didn't interfere. And they like how Rahul turned out. And plus, he got accepted to Harvard and Yale. So for the community.
Side note.
Yes, exactly. But those decisions impacted our family in terms of time for other things, in terms of resources for other things. And I just put my foot down.
I'm just wondering, I really can't imagine a parent doing more and so consciously thinking about what it would be like for their son growing up in a world, particularly as a multiracial and multicultural individual. And yet, there was some phases where Rahul was still quite lonely and struggling, even though he had all this support from his parents, particularly his mother. And how does that feel as a parent when you've gone above and beyond? Like, there really isn't probably much more you could do. And then there's still this gap that you can't touch in a way. Like, that's just between them and God. That's between them and themselves. And you can't walk that last mile with them.
That's true. I mean, you summarized that beautifully. Absolutely. You know, we were older parents, John and I, so we only had one child. And I do regret that. I mean, I never thought that I would have just one child. I always, I come from a family of 4. John comes from a family of 4. And, that would have been something nice to have given Rahul 1 or 2 siblings. And so those are decisions that sometimes are just made for you. You can't do anything about. And that was a decision that was not in our control. And so, so I knew that there's a loneliness that only child have, and you can't take that away. And he has layers upon layers, as you've beautifully described it, being multiracial, multicultural, and then not having a community. In the 20 years, so what was the percentage of multiracial marriages in the year, 2000? I mean, it's maybe in the 9 to 12% or 10%. So even in the population, there isn't a community that is like him. And then you layer upon a South Asian culture, which is, again, our culture is very different from the Judeo-Christian. Sometimes when you marry interracial, you have Judeo-Christian basis, so you understand the other person's religion. You might not accept it, but it's not as much of a jump as it is from a South Asian to a Western. And so we've had all those jumps. Rahul has all that, and he carries that burden with him. And I write about that in my book, about my last story.
Yeah, that maybe you can read us a part of it. I have it
Sure.
here.
Okay, I'd love to. My advice to others marrying out of your culture is to acknowledge that you will gain things and you will lose things. And you may be compromising constantly because things come up that may not have been expected or discussed beforehand. It takes a certain level of patience and tolerance to accept this and continue forging ahead. I believe by marrying out, the expectations that are there for an Indian daughter-in-law did not exist for me. I did not have to adjust. I lost some of my culture, but for me, I gained independence and individuality and the ability to determine how to live my life on my own terms. However, Rahul surpassed my desire for him, becoming connected with his Indian background by electing to learn Bharatanatyam, a classical dance from South India. For 13 years, Rahul learned Bharatanatyam and recently had his Arangetram. His knowledge of Indian mythological stories, our epic poems, our traditions and rituals far exceeds my family's collective knowledge and that of most other South Asians. This makes him unique within the South Asian community. I know that there is a loneliness that Rahul feels by being an only child in our family and being the only multiracial child within both of our families, as well as being part of an ethnic minority group within a minority population. I am impressed with the way that he is navigating his identity and his belonging in the world. My hope is that he finds his community. It's heartbreaking. I mean, you have raised this child. They've been close to you, and I had one child. He was very close to me physically, and we've gone through all these journeys together, navigating life, and then even if you don't even have that, the fact that a child goes away to college, And I was always very adamant, and John also supported that he had to go away. There was never any idea, live at home or even in the state of California, like you're just leaving. I wanted him, again, experience the world and have different experiences. So I knew that was going to happen, but that was very jarring. So the first 3 months of him being in college, we'd had experience of him being away because every summer he went away to camp. That was a month. Camp was, the first summer was really hard for John and I. We had that summer, the glum faces. The 8-year-old boy was 2,000 miles away. But as the summers went on, we got used to that. It was nice to have a month away and to ourselves. But college was different because it just went on and on and on. And you have that gnawing feeling and you have that pit in your stomach. But the only thing I kept coming back to day after day and talking to other parents is you've given him your best. And that's when my friend said, you were lucky you got to do what you wanted with Rahul, acknowledging that he was in a good place and he turned out well, and he's in a good place that has resources and has appreciated him for who he is and what he's bringing. And I got to see him. I visited, and he's thriving. And as a parent, that's all you can hope for, that you have given them some foundation appropriate enough that it is their life. It is their journey. I lived my life that way. I broke out and my parents didn't give it to me. I struggled, but I broke out and I have lived my life my way. Whether good or bad, if you look back upon it, some people would not think it was delayed marriage, older parents, all that stuff. But hey, Rahul turned out well. The story has a good ending up till now. So that's what I go back to bed every night, you think. And that's what I liked listening, circling back to your interview with him, was, of course you love him. He's my child. So I would love anything he did. But I also listened to it being the Asian parent with a critical ear. And I just stood back and said, he's thoughtful, he's reflective, he's appreciated the journey that we took to get him where he is. And even if he wasn't there, what it took, because we were navigating different cultures, different layers, older parents, my breast cancer, which you didn't know about, but I was navigating that, not having a central community, but finding people in different communities to hold on to or talk to or whatever. And it's coming together for him. And I thought, wow, I thought he would be where he is today in his thinking in 10 years. But I was grateful, again, the older parent in me thinking, wow, thank God I got to listen to it now. Who knows where I'll be in 10 years. Yeah. So all of that has come together.
You only met John when you were 40, right? And that was considered very late within probably the Indian community.
Yes, I met John. This is why I said early on I was very special. I had those very odd side effects having breast cancer. So I'm always the outlier I've seen in my life. I'm an outlier everywhere. John was the universe's 40th birthday present to me. I met him on my birthday at a business meeting, and he didn't know it was my birthday. But I look back now, because that's why I look back and say, well, I got one child in right under the older age, being an older parent and childbirth age. So yeah, I'm special. That was not my choice. If I look back, and I do look back and say, well, he could have come when I was 30. What was wrong with that? I was already developed. I'm a mature adult. I'm working. Why didn't it happen? What happened between 30 and 40? I don't know. But there are a lot of, I have American women friends that are not married, still not married, never got married, or people got married younger and divorced by 40. So the society has changed here, and Indian society has changed. It was very unusual. For me and my generation, my being Indian at that age, at my age, I have almost a 20-year-old son. My Indian friends are grandparents now. They got married in their early 20s or at 17, 18, 19 and had kids. That was our generation. But today I see Indian women and American women, you're not married until you're 30 or 40. And A lot of them, I'm surprised even in India how many have stayed unmarried. We have that. I'm like, oh, but you're in India. You have opportunities to marry an Indian, Women are not. So the world has changed. So in those 20 years, so I don't look back and say, I did not do it cognitively. It was just what unfolded for me.
It seemed there was also like a pretty great dose of confidence there too. Like you trusted your path in a way, just from reading again some of what you wrote in Mixed Daisies, how you were okay with being 40 and unmarried. It was the people around you that were kind of projecting that that's wrong. And you seem, even speaking to you here now, like there was some sort of acceptance of, yeah, I'll be the outlier. I'll be the different one. Where did this acceptance come from?
I think that what I have, and I've learned to trust it, intuition, certain things I just don't feel right to me and I bolt. And that was this getting married. It wasn't that they were not wanting me to get married, my parents. There were opportunities. I could have married the person they brought in front of me. That's what a lot of my friends did. They all did that. This is the person you're going to marry. Like, okay, well, that was our community. That's how we were raised. Something in me just bolted. And I can't put a finger on it, but I have had my astrology read. And that's just me. And that's just for good or bad. And that's my resignation. Whether I can roll my eyes at God, like look up, like here we go again. So I've told myself I'm special. That is how I've learned to navigate my own life, is that's going to happen to me. Why does that have to happen to me? If you want to make me an outlier, and I do this every time there's a Powerball and you watch TV and it's like 1 out of the 833 million. Well, why can't I win the Powerball? Why do I have to have this unique side effect that the doctors don't even know about? If you're going to give me such odds, I can think of a lot other odds that I would like to have instead of this one. But this is what's been given to me. So you have to learn and navigate it. And it's not easy. I mean, daily these conversations are going on in my head.
Yeah. But there's still this optimism, or
I love life,
yeah,
and I love living it. And I just feel like I have, one life to live that I know about, and I want to live it. I really do. And I've always been that way. And it took me a long time to understand that. If you asked me when I was in my early 20s why this person wasn't a good fit, I don't know. I can't tell you. And not only that person, why did none of the other ones in the 20 years? I don't know. It just didn't, right? Sometimes you're just like, it just doesn't. And sometimes things happen and you're just like, okay, that's my path. And I think, the older you get, that's what you, I don't think resign. I think accept, but accept in a good way. And Rahul, as we were growing up, when he was younger, he would say, why couldn't I have had a brother or sister? And it just didn't work out that way. And I would ask myself too, why couldn't we just have had a brother or sister or something? And then he got a little older. And then I remembered saying, well, then you would have had to share your room. And the shock look on his face, like, oh, and toys. And we would not have been able to do this stuff well, maybe I'm okay. There's right. You learn what you have and you have to put it in a different forum. And then I did tell him, and in my own thinking, when I talk to my God and I talk all the time, believe me, and I would say, but I wanted 4 or 5 kids. Like I wanted to have that full family life. Why didn't? And then one day it came to me, and these things just come. And knowing our mythological stories and everything. And there's one story where one of the women, she has 5 husbands. And and that's not done because usually it's polygamy. Men have multiple wives and women don't walk around having 5 husbands. And the way that it's presented in this story, because it's just, that story is just accepted in Indian mythology. Like nobody thinks twice about questioning why did she have to have 5 husbands. And God explained it this way. Well, she had such a long list of the qualities she wanted in a man. He just couldn't find one man to fit it all. So he gave her 5. And one day, and without me thinking about this at that time, one day that popped in my head. I gave you one son because I gave you all the qualities in one son. And then I shared that with Rahul just a couple years ago. And he was like, you never told me. I was like, no, you don't want it to go to your head. And I didn't want to have bad, like we say, evil eye. But I really believe that was meant to be. And look how, again, I come back to how not, he's got a full life to lead. And we hope all the foundation that he's gotten, he makes it a deserving one. But I believe that that's why I was just given one, because I poured my heart and soul.
You've mentioned a few resources throughout this episode. Are there any other resources you want to mention?
There's a couple of books. There is a book out there, Raising Mixed Race, and there's another book, Raising Multiracial Children, 2 different authors. They're general books, but they're just good because they raise the issues. I think nobody has answers. They talk about the issues and the awareness, and then they also do studies. So they both have little vignettes of stories about families they've worked with. Ours is strictly vignettes and longer stories about parents and families. So all the books together give you different perspectives in this issue. There's also a film that came out a couple years ago called 1000% of Me, Growing Up Mixed.
Yes.
And W. Kamau Bell, and he's a Black man married to a white woman. And again, I watched all of these. I read all of these. You're going to figure out where you fall in all of this. So those are good resources. And I imagine there's more being written now as we speak.
There better be. Well, Punita, where can people find you?
First thing is, Rahul has his website, Hum Sab Global Teen, and he's not updating it as much as he should, but he is in college. But there's a list of resources there that are more organizations, and some come and go. One thing that I have noticed, college years, across many universities are multiracial clubs. I mean, I was surprised there was one at Rahul's high school, and maybe now it's at the high school level too. But colleges are really into this because there are so many mixed race kids now, right? In the last 20 years, what did parents do? They married out. And now the kids are there saying, I need people like me. Maybe not the same ethnic mix, but people like me, and they're there. So that is another resource. It's great out there. I think for these kids, they really get along. And so Rahul's website has it all. Mine is coming up. So mine is just punitakhanna.com. And again, it will have resources. It's for parents, for kids, for anybody that just wants to hear what else is going on in the community.
Wonderful. And then, of course, go get the book, Mixed Daisies, Stories of Multiracial South Asians. I recommend it to everyone.
The themes are so universal. It's not just multiracial, it's also monoracial people. You might end up in an interracial relationship, or you might have friends. The general is anybody that's othered. And it's interesting because a lot of white people feel they're othered, and they've gotten it. So they have read monoracial. White people have read the book saying, oh, I get it. I understand. I never felt I belonged because of X, Y, Z. So it's building community, raising awareness, and getting information. And the more informed you are, the more armed you are, the better human being you become. And that's what you can ascribe to others also. Thank you.
Yes, yes. If you enjoyed this episode, listening to our conversation today, please share it with anyone you think that might benefit from this conversation. Also, please follow Mixunderstood, subscribe to the channel so that you get the notification when the next episode is up. And please leave a review. I would really appreciate that. If you have a story or any thoughts you want to share on what we talked about today, please feel free to write in to mixunderstoodpod@gmail.com. You can also leave me a voicemail at 323-524-8662. There's also a Patreon. If you want to support this work, you can sign up for the Patreon. There's great low prices there for any budget, and it would mean a lot, and it would help fueling this podcast to keep going and bringing more incredible guests to share their incredible stories with you. Punita, it was such a pleasure. I learned so much from you today, and it was just fun being in the same room too, in the same space, to see you in person. So thank you so much. And thank you for sharing Rahul with us. It was a pleasure to get to look at your family from multiple angles, and you truly are a success story. So I commend you for raising such an incredible young man and for doing so much for the mixed community. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to say bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode was produced by me, music by Matthias Kunzli.